seen ambient so long. What's up, ambient?
I haven't seen ambient so long.
Yeah. You wanted to see me, but the camera doesn't allow.
Got Rafa, long time no see. One of our first closers. Now looking to growth through acquisition. Am I right, Rafa?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let Lucas is working with Elliot on his transaction, actually. And so since he has first-hand experience, he's going to do the introduction for Elliot.
Oh.
Cool. This is awesome. I feel like I'm not going to live up to Walker here. But I did a little quick research on Elliot, and I also remember this. So Elliot Holland is here to talk to us. He is a mechanical engineer. He's a Harvard MBA. He's the founder and managing director of Guardian Due Diligence, which is a financial due diligence firm for searchers who are doing ETA. And I've been working with Elliot since I think April, both on a little deal sourcing and then on actual financial due diligence on this business that I'm going to close on July 1st. And I thought that I would talk a little bit about why I chose Elliot over some of the other providers that I interviewed. And I think the answer is, like, when I went about doing my search, I wanted to surround myself with as many believable people as possible. And believable is, like, I define believable as somebody who's, like, done the thing in question multiple times, right? And so in this case, it's like somebody who's bought a business successfully multiple times with like successful outcomes. And so Walker is like a highly believable person. And then I went and like looked at all these different financial due diligence providers, and Elliot was the only one who was really believable. Like, he's actually been in our shoes. He's like bought multiple businesses himself, and that just like really differentiated him from the rest of my options. And so I made the choice to work with him, and it actually, like, throughout my transaction process, Elliot and I would talk about a lot more than just the cash proof or the quality of earnings. He helped me with negotiations, with how to manage the broker, and have initial calls with the seller, and just added a lot more value than any like an accountant would. He did all of that, but a lot more too. And so I'm really grateful for him, as you can hear. And the last thing is that towards the end of the call, Chelsea said that she would send a document and a special offer for lab members for Guardian. And so stay tuned for that. But that's my intro, and Elliot, go ahead.
Well, thank you. I may owe you a check, Lucas. Thank you. That was great. Nice to be here with you all. I pride myself in this business. I do a lot of work with a lot of people in different sort of arenas. To Lucas's point, it's a lot more than cash proofs and quality of earnings and trailing 12-month EBITDA and revenue recognition. It's enabling people to get good deals done and to advising them away from bad deals and financial ruin. So I'm glad to be here. And I think the topic of sort of diligence war stories is both sort of one of my favorite topics to talk about and probably one of the most relevant. And so I am excited to be here. Thank you to Chelsea and Walker for allowing me to speak.
Absolutely. Happy to have you.
I don't know how you guys wanted to start this. Chelsea, have they seen the list of 20 due diligence war stories?
Nope. I can send it now if you want, or I can pull it at the end to you.
If you wouldn't mind sending it. So let me give you a bit of background on me and the firm so that you'll sort of understand the genesis of that. And then check your email. I think Chelsea's going to send over a one-pager of 20 different due diligence war stories that, if anyone's interested in, I can hop into the discussion of that, or we can talk about other things that are diligence related. Up to you. So I reformed engineer, did consulting at Accenture, doing strategy consulting for a couple of years, went to Harvard for business school. I got involved with the private equity industry. I love the industry, but the private equity industry requires you to own equity to really get the outsized returns. And so being an analyst at a private equity firm is not really owning the equity. And so I transitioned out of a major private equity firm to then start a independent sponsor or sort of self-funded search firm called Ellsworth Partners with a mentor who, to Lucas's point, had been there, done that, had credibility. So similar concept there. We looked at deals a bit larger than the ETA folks. And then we did a tow truck deal, we did a automotive parts deal, and we did a clinical trials deal. And then my partner was effectively retired. And so I spun out on my own under Spartan Capital and worked on the healthcare industry primarily, particularly durable medical equipment companies. And around 2017, I looked up and I said, the market for advisors, financial diligence for deals under $5 million in enterprise value is pretty terrible, honestly. Lots of lawyers, lots of accountants, but a lot of misinformation, a lot of sneaky gimmicks that are at the entrepreneur's detriment. So who would think you call an accounting firm that's known for telling you numbers and they can't tell you a number on what a quality of earnings costs? Or who would think that you try to get a deal done and your financial advisor can only talk about trailing 12-month EBITDA and revenue recognition? Or you get your accountant on the phone with your seller and your accountant frustrates your seller and causes you angst in your deal. So your whatever, $25,000, $15,000 quality of earnings caused you $50,000 worth of pain. So seeing all those issues, I decided to start the service firm I wish I had when I was on the buy side, Guardian Due Diligence. And we provide sort of a full suite of buy side services. So even Lucas mentioned we do some deal sourcing. The offer today will be around helping people with valuations and letter of intent creation and structure. But most of our work is in financial due diligence, quality of earnings, and cash proofs. And the three things that I think really differentiate us: one, in the first week and a half, we do an executive summary review. So we spread the numbers, show them to the client, and that typically kicks out 85% or so of deal-breaking issues. And it might not seem like a lot, but I used to get my first draft QoE reports 3 weeks, 4 weeks into my projects. And, you catch reports where, cash flow is off 40%, right? And you find out 3.5 weeks in, and you're looking at the accountant like, you knew that in the first week. You wasted my time, my money. I spent 3 weeks talking to lenders, equity partners, my family, and I really should have been on to the next deal. And so we set up that 1 week kind of checkpoint to make sure that we're providing good service and timely service. We focus as much on the future cash flow as the past. So most firms are looking at trailing 12-month EBITDA, trailing 12-month cash flow. But you're actually not buying trailing 12-month anything. You're buying next year, next 5 years, next forever years, in some of your cases, EBITDA. And so last year's helps inform next year's, but that's it. And so we focus quite a bit on what's coming next. In fact, a huge portion of my project with Lucas was looking at growth and profitability and focusing our eyes on where he was going to get his return. So that's the second area where we focus differently. And the third is we wrap all of our financial due diligence services with our deal advisory services. So that's the stuff he said around negotiation, how to handle a broker, how to handle a seller. Is this deal situation normal? How do I get into or out of this deal situation? EBITDA is down or SDE is down 15%. What the heck do I do? How do I get value back for that through price structure, other things? And so because we're able to wrap our services from a financial diligence perspective with deal advisory things, we're able to add and deliver a more complete solution. So for fear of speaking too long, and I know these things are way more fun when they're interactive, hopefully some of you guys have gotten the one pager. I saw a question about, do we specialize in industries? Walker actually asked me that question on our first interview last year. And we focus on size. So I've seen probably every single industry you could imagine, or I'd bet anybody $1,000 if they can send me an industry I haven't seen and can't send you something from my computer in that industry, I'd take that bet. So deals under 10 million bucks, I spent the past 10 years of my life there in small and medium sized businesses from a self-funded perspective. So I always paid for my own diligence. So I'm way more size than industry. I don't do a lot of stuff in high technology just because there's better people for that. I don't do a lot of things where there's a very speculative, highly volatile underlying asset or commodity that governs the valuation. So you won't see me in like specialty polymer chemicals as often as you will see like manufacturing of normal chemicals. But I think for like 99% of what you guys are looking at, it's stuff that I've seen both online and offline. So what I like to do now is hopefully you have the list of 20 war stories. I'd love to hop into any that seem relevant. I'm looking at the questions in the chat, so please keep those coming. But I don't think you guys are shy. That's not what I hear from Walker.
Yeah, no, we always get a ton of questions. And honestly, if you have questions for Elliot, feel free to chime those in too. Typically, we ask them to kind of talk through when we have people come in, specifically Elliot, to share kind of stories around where due diligence impacted the deal, right? Because that's typically what we don't get answers to when people speak. And so, but that's always questions that I get from you guys. It's like, okay, so what exactly might I find in due diligence that I should be walking away from the deal for, or things like that. So if you have questions like that, love the document that Elliot sent. So let me know if you haven't gotten that. But basically, it's just things that have happened, right? And if you want to learn more about that thing because it feels familiar, then please feel free to jump in.
I have a great one if I could throw one out there for you, Elliot.
Sure.
Maybe it's not a great one, but it's very relevant for me right now.
Then it's great.
Look, I'm under LOI with the business several years. The revenue's just kind of trailing off since maybe 2018, 2017. I know we have some health issues, that kind of thing. And so I kind of pressed him like, hey, what's leading to this revenue drop? And he seems to be kind of unaware that it even happened, right? So I don't know if it's just like owner burnout. What I'm trying to figure out is like, how do I push on this, right? How do I figure out if it's just owner burnout, maybe he's not trying as hard, he has health issues, versus there's a real problem here?
So that's an amazing question. So how long have you been under LOI?
That was good.
Well, the reason I say that is because this is the crux. This is the crux of diligence. How do you like see through walls and around corners? And so there's a drop in revenue. Why is kind of what you asked in an elaborate way. And that's really, whether it's going up or down, you should understand why. So Jason, that really is an amazing question. How long have you been under letter of intent?
2 weeks.
Okay. So my recommendation for you is to assume the simplest answer. So if he's having health issues and he hasn't disclosed that yet, he's probably not going to disclose that for a while. I think at the beginning of the process, the searcher is actually building trust with the seller. So, don't expect to hear about his cancer or like anything significant in week 2. The second,
you already shared that with me. Maybe right before or right after LOI, he kind of said that he's cancer free now, but he had some serious ailments a few years ago, and that's kind of part of why he's selling the business. Is he's like, I need to spend more time with my family, and something happens, that kind of thing. But he's actually told me now.
So does the timeline of the revenue degradation follow his cancer diagnosis?
I'd say it is after the cancer diagnosis.
That was kind of what I heard.
He's still currently going through chemo, so yeah.
Well, to not be able to answer like each and every question specifically, Jason, but generally sort of how do you tell what the degradation in revenue is due to? First off, you need to figure out where is it, right? So you need to look at sort of sales by customer, by product, by service. Where is the reduction? Is it in a particular industry, a particular customer, a particular product line or service line? Then who manages sales in that service line, in that product line, or in that way? And then did somebody drop the ball? Is it sort of one customer went away? Is it 5 customers went away? Is it the whole industry went away? And then is it something that's indicative of that business? So like food delivery's up, but his food delivery store is down. So things like that. So essentially like come up with 5 or 6 hypotheses that could describe the downward trend in revenue, and so therefore profit, and then prove or disprove each one in a specific way. So like you should have the customer list and sales by customer. So is it a customer issue? You should have sales by product or service. So is it in a product or service specifically or across the board? If it's across the board, who manages sales? Like if the owner doesn't manage sales, then a revenue reduction because the owner has cancer doesn't make as much sense to me as if he does own sales and manage it. So those are things I would look at. And then the reality is, if somebody took their eye off the ball, the likelihood that they tell you that they did is low. Now, some sellers will say I took the eye off the ball, but that typically is covering something else. So this isn't the land of honorability for most people, right? This is the land of every lie in profit or SDE they tell you, they get 3 to 6 times it. Pretty huge motivation to tell a story. So you have to actually come up with your own fact base, your own point of view. Not everything that you know is true is going to ever be validated by the seller, right? It could have been he fell out with a client. He's not going to tell you he told one of his clients to go to hell, right? So you got to think about, there's also some things that even if they're true, people aren't going to tell you. So that's why you have to go set up your own set of hypotheses and prove or disprove them using the facts that you have. And then if you get to the end and you still don't understand it, that might be a reason to not do the deal or to discount the deal or to change the structure. A lot of what we walk our clients through is not so much is the deal good or bad, but based on this new data that you found, there's 3 ways typically to get restitution for things you find in diligence, right? You can change the price, you can change the structure, or you can mitigate the risk or challenge with something you're going to do post-close. And so those are the 3 general ways to get value back if you find something in diligence. And so maybe it's a 10% of enterprise value issue, right? And so you find a 10% of enterprise value answer.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Chelsea, I may need help on the questions or someone. I'm trying to read through them, but
I can rattle them off.
thank you.
I have one question, and so I'm totally gonna jump line.
Cheater.
I want my own question answered. So one question that I've gotten in the past, and not having your background, I would like your opinion, which is, what do you do when someone doesn't have what you're asking for in due diligence? Like, what does that mean, and how do you handle it?
That's my favorite question. It really is. So when I first started this, I get really frustrated when I ask for stuff and wouldn't get it. You know, I'm young, charging MBA, and I'm bringing this money to the table, and why can't I get my financials in Excel? And where's your fixed asset list? And why can't I get, how am I going to buy your company and I don't get customer lists for 2 months? Then I started getting into the trenches, and I realized that sometimes it was that crazy dude in the garage has it and I don't know he has it, so I don't have it. Or I pay my accountant to do all that mess. Holland, get off me, man. I run a business. And then as I got more into the trenches, I realized the answer I think is accurate. And Jason, I'm going to come back to what I told you. Part of this process is understanding what data is required to run a business. And that's a function of your operational knowledge of an industry. So like, for instance, I know manufacturing because I'm a reformed engineer. That was a long time ago. But if I go into a manufacturing facility and I ask like, hey, where's your fixed asset list? Oh man, we don't have one. So you mean to tell me if one of these like $1 million machines walks out of the door, you're not going to know? Hold on. So you mean to tell me that tax like benefits you got from depreciation, you don't know how to calculate it? Wait, that depreciation line is a function of fixed assets. And then as I've matured, instead of saying that, aha, like here's the data, now I will calmly kind of say, oh, wait, I see depreciation on your taxes. Your accountant has the fixed asset list. Can I just contact your accountant and get it? And so when you're not getting data that you want, I think the first question, and it's really a test of how well you know the industry, what is the data set that any reasonable manager in a business would need to have? So let's say you're buying like a content website. They don't have their AdWords. That's pretty hard to believe, right? Or you sell B2B software. Oh, we don't keep a customer list. Hold on. These are $100,000 per item sales and you don't have a customer list. And so I think part of it is stepping back from this is a line item in a due diligence checklist and step into this is a business that must be ran. And sometimes I think it's not so much they don't have it. It's think about who in the company has to have it and then just ask to speak to that person. So in my one instance, I said, if it's a fixed asset list and they have depreciation, the CPA must have it. If it's a customer list, I promise you, whoever's heading up sales has a customer list. If it's Excel financials, well, I promise you, the CPA is not taking in PDFs and pushing out PDFs. There's some IT system somewhere that has what you're looking for. So I think I take a different tack, Chelsea, in terms of most of the data pieces in a due diligence list are almost required by some person to have. And sometimes what it is you might not get it in document form. But if you don't have a customer list, go talk to the head of sales and just have them rattle it off. There's no way they can manage sales and not have it. I had one instance where I was doing diligence on a engineering company that had no financial system at all. No QuickBooks, no Zoho. They had invoices back to 94. And if you aggregated those, that was revenue. And then they had export of their costs from Wells Fargo. And that was cost, revenue minus cost, operating profit. And so I'm like, hey, where's your backlog? Oh, we don't have a CRM. Who are you calling tomorrow? The day after. The day after that. Well, that's your backlog. Those are clients that you know are going to come online pretty soon, that you haven't closed the invoice yet. But I just took that list. We sat through 90 minutes. That was as painful for them as it was for me. And now you have your backlog list. So that's typically it. And then I also would say this, Chelsea, the one relationship you cannot tarnish in this process on accident is your relationship with the seller. So scream at their accountant, scream at your accountant, scream at me, scream at Chelsea, scream at Walker, scream at your parents, scream at your boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife. Do not upset the seller unless you absolutely have to and it's on purpose. So if you don't get something, wait a month. Another part of this process is some things the seller won't give to you until you've earned certain trust with them. So kind of a long answer, but that's the most comprehensive answer I can give to that question.
No, I love that answer. And have you ever come across a company that, like, it was a symptom of the problem, right? Like, they didn't have any of those things because they didn't know how to run a business, and that's exactly why they were trying to sell the business and why it wasn't performing like it should, because they didn't have any of that. And it's like, at that point, then that's I always say that's a data point that you need to have.
It is. I'll answer that two ways, and one of them will be one of the stories. So one way is they may not have a CRM, but they have a salesperson who has a list of who they're calling tomorrow, right? They may not have standard operating procedures, but the top 5 departments or 3 departments in the organization run every day to create that cash flow you want to buy. So you can sit down with the people and get the standard operating procedures if you sit with them long enough. They may not have a projection model, right? Or a budget. But I promise you the controller knows how much money they're spending next week. I promise you that the head of operations can't spend an endless budget next week and not have the owner kicking them in the butt. So I think of it in 2 ways. Like, is the data there in some way? It kind of has to be. Is it in that nice, cute way that you'd prefer to ingest it? Maybe not. To me, that's most of the deals that I've seen. But then number one on my war stories, I was looking at a security company, a company that installed like card access paraphernalia apparatus and like video cameras at side of commercial buildings so you can get in and they can see who's coming in. And loved the business. They had a recurring element. Seller seemed like a reasonable guy. And I flew out to Katy, Texas to go see him. He wanted to see me before he accepted my LOI. And I show up to the Starbucks because he didn't want all of his employees knowing he was selling. We can't even step into Starbucks. Like, you know how they have those little two stairs sometimes in like shopping malls or like strip malls? It's like two. We're on the two steps. He's like, hey, man, you won't believe this, Elliot. You won't believe it. My online QuickBooks went down this morning. How could it go down the exact day you came? I got my IT person looking at this. We'll probably, hopefully we get it today or tomorrow. We'll be fine. Everything in me wanted me to turn around and go back to the car and drive back to the airport and fly home because I knew he was lying. I don't know how any of you guys are into software or understand like uptime contracts, but like companies like Intuit have like 99.999% uptime service level agreements. So even if it's down for an hour, you'd see it on CNN. So this guy's lying to me, but part of getting good at diligence is instead of going home, I wanted to see how bad he was going to lie to me. So I went through the song and dance. He was wasting my time. I was wasting his. So he had told all three of his top salespeople lies to come tell me. He had told his controller lies to tell me. He had come up with like 3 different sets of partial financials to confuse me. The whole thing. And so Chelsea, one is I think a lot of data is in some form. Just got to find the person who owns it. But then sometimes it's not so much like a data point for I can fix this. It's a lie because if they told you that they had it, then they'd be responsible for what's in it. And that's where one of my old bosses used to say, where are they hiding the salami, Holland? Where are they hiding the salami? And so you got to sort of figure out what it is.
I love that. All right. I'm going to jump into the questions.
Sure.
So in the very beginning, you were talking about how you don't specialize in a specific industry. It's more about deal size. And so Theo asked, what are you excluding when you say technology?
And so I'm talking like if you were trying, so here's 2 things. If it's financial diligence specifically, meaning did the business create the cash flows that it's representing, I can do anything. If you want sort of the full suite of Guardian, like 100% potency of what we deliver the best, which is, I think there's one question people really want to know in diligence, and it's not trailing 12-month EBITDA. It's, is the business worth what I'm paying for it, right? Yeah. Here's the price. Is it worth this? If you were trying to buy like an artificial intelligence or machine learning company that was stealth in Silicon Valley, could I tell you the cash flow? Sure. Would I be the best person to help you understand, is the business worth the price you're paying? Probably not. And it would be unfair and would dilute my message if I tried to. I'm not going to get rich. You're doing business with guys like Lucas and telling them I know how to manage a automobile supplier and understand those businesses, and then I don't, and he finds out 6 months after he closes, and then my name is mud. So when I'm talking technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning, cybersecurity, like if it's cutting edge, like if an article about a technology change is going to, change like SpaceX or something like that. That's what I'm talking about in terms of high technology. If it's, software, regular, or sort of some sort of hardware that's technology also, or do a lot of SaaS companies, that stuff is like well within my purview. In fact, I even work with a venture capital firm here in Atlanta, helping them with their diligence on early stage stuff. So it's not technology that I don't do. It's kind of like high technology, like very cutting edge stuff.
What I'm going to do, so it's not just me talking, because we did this the other day on a call and I really get tired of my own voice.
Okay.
I'm just going to let you guys know kind of the order that we went into. So Cervantes, you were next and you asked a question about the stages of engagement. So you want to hop on and ask your question?
Yeah. Thank you, Elliot, and thank you, Chelsea. My question is regarding when we are engaging third-party firm, may not necessarily be Guardian. So typically we have a couple of scope stages. Say the first stage, the third party always said is is the no-go. So when can we cut? So how do the engager like us, we try to buy something, we engage their party, what's the scope we can cut, and then we can be evaluated more transition smoothly, instead of once we engage, we need to do all the way in, and then they kind of waste some money. Yeah, thank you.
I want to make sure I heard. So the main thing I heard is what can we cut and scope. But can you fill in a little bit there so I make sure I answer your question appropriately?
For example, I engage the first part, maybe at first part is the business due diligence.
Okay.
Yeah, the second part may be the closing. So maybe actually before the business due diligence, maybe contract negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I don't know, do you help your client or typical due diligence firm, do you help the client doing the negotiation on LOI? Because you find out some major item you feel you should put particular thing in the LOI, even in the purchase agreement.
Sure. No, great question. So yes and no. So for those of you that are like marketers, one of the things that I have to be careful about is advertising too many things that I do because people sort of forget the message. So I'm sort of like laser focused on financial due diligence. Like I want to own that lane. Like when people think of like ETA, acquisition entrepreneur, financial due diligence and quality of earning, Elliot Holland, I want to be your guy. However, even Lucas said I do deal sourcing, right? But I'm not going to market that as much. So Cervantes, and I might have screwed that up, the way we think about it is our quality of earnings is, we've sort of structured it specifically for this market and to be specifically fixed fee, right? So we charge a single fee for the whole thing, and to be incremental, just like you said, and to also, because we're former deal guys, we're thinking the same way you are. Like past the LOI, you're checking, do I even want this business? If I don't, stop. Do I trust the seller? If I don't, stop. Is the EBITDA and cash flow plus or minus? If not, stop. You're not even looking at contracts until further down the line. You don't want to see a customer list until you have those first things handled. So the way we structure the typical quality of earnings is that first week is sort of like those deal breakers. So we focus very heavily in the first week on deal breakers. It actually is probably more to your benefit than ours, because what that means is on $15,000 quality of earnings, which is our price for quality of earnings under $2.5 million in enterprise value. If in the first week we say, run for the hills, no way, don't do this. You're only into us for 1/4 of the fee, right? But we spend that time trying to knock out sort of 85% of deal breaking issues as a professional requirement, but also as a personal courtesy. Like nobody wants to hear that EBITDA is off 40% 4 weeks in after I've done some like detailed contract analysis. So you're gonna look at me like I got 3 eyes. And I remember looking at accountants that way, like, you knew this earlier. So we do it, but slightly differently. So we're going to look at like deal breakers. Like, is EBITDA crazy? Is cash flow crazy? Is working capital nuts? Is this thing really losing money and they're hiding it? That's week 1. Week 2 is everything we found in week 1. Now let's discuss it with the seller and you to make sure we're getting qualifications. We're moving the needle up and down. Now we have not only sort of what we forensically found, but now we have seller validation. Oh no, Elliot, you know what? That would have looked like that, but it's actually something different. And once you get that new data, now the facts sort of make more sense. Week 3 and 4 is when we get into some of those more bespoke things like contracts or sort of revenue by customer history and trends, line items in the income statement that are moving up or down. And then week 4 is really just getting the report ready for your lenders or your equity investors. So at any point, if you say stop, we'll stop, and you're only sort of into us for as much like the prorated amount. And then part of the scope is we have a standard quality of earnings scope, but then we're flexible. So like with Lucas, we changed the whole scope. And we said, hey, part of it's going to be a quick financial check. Part of it's going to be growth and profitability. And so what that meant is now we're layering, well, Lucas, what do you mean? So does that mean the first 2 weeks we're only looking at financial stuff? It's kind of stay in the deal, kick out, which means I'm not going to have an answer on profitability week 1. Yeah, Elliot, that's what I mean. Okay, so then profitability and growth came week 2 and 3. And that's sort of how we backed into, I think, what you're saying. What I'll tell you is you can flog me if I do something lower priority before higher priority. Because I'm thinking the same way you are. Because I'd hate to tell you that, the working capital is perfect and EBITDA is off 40%.
Yeah, that's good. I just want one more follow-up question. If the lender asks the professional third-party accounting to have a financial review report, will your report satisfy that?
Oh, absolutely. We couldn't be in business if it didn't.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, thank you so much.
In fact, most of our accountants were lenders in their past life. So they actually speak like lender language. They do the secret handshake and everything. It's great.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks, Fontes. Okay, Todd, you're next. Something about factoring? Hi, by the way.
Hey.
How are you?
Doing fine.
Getting engaged in buying a house.
Okay.
How are you, man? Good to see you.
Congrats.
Good to see you as well.
Thank you. You too. Hey, just wondering, this may be a short question. Have you ever had an experience with factoring companies, acquisition factoring companies?
Yep, it's tough, because they're hard to finance.
Yeah, well, that was my next question. But if you have, now maybe this is an offline question because valuation, I'm struggling with, although I'm just getting into it. Things like, they've raised $9 million from friends and family. They're paying them 6.5%.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to EBITDA, to me, that's kind of a cost of goods sold almost more than an interest expense.
Yes.
So just things, right? I mean,
yes.
So I'm kind of struggling with it, and what's kind of a multiple, or I've heard valuation techniques like 25% as a percentage of AR, and those kind of. Have you dealt with those? That kind of thing?
Yeah, I would have owed you $1,000 if not, right? Absolutely have. No, I like the businesses. So although they are hard to finance, they're not impossible to. So I've looked at them. I mean, factoring is great, right? It's an asset-based business where you get a margin.
It checks every box.
Except
business.
financeability.
It's not SBA financeable, and even regular lenders I've talked to are like.
And I don't know if you know why, but it's because on financial service businesses, if you acquire them, there's certain financial regulatory requirements that make it very tough for banks to finance them because of the speculative nature of them. So you almost have to get into like SEC level regulatory stuff if you buy one. Now, if you started one, it's not the same. But if you have some specific questions, Todd, I think we've spoken before, right?
Yeah.
Shoot me a note with whatever you got. I'll take a look at it. I mean, I like the businesses, right? So sometimes what you have to do is sort of buy it with outside of SBA capital. Sometimes it's easier to finance with the bank after you own it, which is kind of a backwards way. But if you like it that much, we can talk about how to structure something like that.
Awesome. All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Whew. I almost owe somebody $1,000. That was.
All right, Matt. Shandy, you're up. Kind of talk about timelines, I think, right? Process.
Yeah, thanks, Chelsea. Hey, Elliot.
Hey.
I'm just curious when you would recommend us bringing someone like you into the picture. Is this right now when we're looking at businesses? If this is, when there's an LOI, is this after the LOI? Kind of what's the preferred cadence on your end?
Sure. So 2 times people do it. I like one time better than the other, but I understand both. So having been in your shoes before, the traditional way is to wait till the last minute until you can't avoid paying anymore, and then you bring somebody in. The downside with that is what you forego in sort of payment of fees, you lose in advice, in material things that affect everything else. So like I tell people all the time, I can't get you out of a bad LOI. I can't get you out of a bad negotiation. And as much as like logic would make you think that if you found information that changed the valuation during diligence, you could adjust that. If you try to adjust purchase price more than like 15 or 20%, fly a kite. So the one time people do it that I think is kind of suboptimal is sort of, a couple of weeks after LOI. I just think it's far too late. The other thing is sometimes we're busier with deals than others. And so you could want to work with us, we could want to work with you, and we might not be able to schedule it in the time that you need to hit your deadlines. Additionally, with the SBA, they'll tell you 60 days, and it can be a little bit longer than that. And so if you need a lead time to sort of land your closing date, what I would recommend more is come to us beforehand. Now, what I mean is sort of we'll do valuations and letter of intent reviews as an investment in our relationship. In fact, the offer I'm going to talk about at the end of this session will be about that. And you may not engage us, but we're sort of now, you're not getting into a terrible LOI negotiation. You're not getting into terrible structure. You're not putting something in the letter that the SBA won't support. And so you can't actually close the letter. One of the things that happens a lot, Matt, and it's tough because it's one of those things where it's not in a book anywhere, but sometimes searchers give up leverage in the LOI negotiation that they never get back. Like if you give too much in the letter of intent to get the deal off the market, and then you try to like reset your feet in to become like big bad money bags guy or gal, it's too late. And so some of what I do is like, you could do that and you'd pay for it. You'd be willing to pay the extra 500,000, 400,000. But if you do that now, the implications of that downstream when you're negotiating working capital, indemnities, non-compete, employment agreement, you'll be so far behind the eight ball, it's not in your best interest. So I would encourage you, long answer, to come. When you start thinking about writing an LOI, we should be on the phone. And then that way we can already sort of start like penciling you in for, because success is the LOI getting accepted. And in that case, you're going to need some help, and it'd be better we were talking than not.
Makes sense. Thanks, Elliot.
You're very welcome.
Perfect. I just had a question that I feel like I've gotten 3 times on the Slack channel recently.
Okay.
Which is, who can provide technical due diligence? So specifically people that are looking at SaaS and online companies.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that your firm offers?
Yeah, in both ways. So I just did online business diligence yesterday for a client. So we just finished that up. What's funny, so sometimes we do it with vendors, but because I run my own digital marketing stack at Guardian, sort of a lot of times we're asked to do it and we can do it just fine. I mean, we know all the AdWords, analytics, MailChimp, CRM, HubSpot, Active Campaign stuff. So this one client from yesterday, they wanted us to do it. We sometimes do it through vendors. On SaaS technology, that's one where if you want like a real technology review, like how advanced or differentiated is this SaaS software technology, we would do that through one of our sort of approved vendors. So we can absolutely do that. It won't be part of our sort of base QoE cost, but depending on what kind of scope you want done and how intense you want it, we can sort of figure out the right way to sort of match your needs with an effective price.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, this was somebody, the most recent one was somebody wanting somebody to actually like dive in with the code to make sure the code was down.
Right.
It's like, I don't even know what you're talking about, so I can't, I'm not the good person to help you. And so at least knowing that we can funnel them your way and say that can be part of due diligence, and you just need another partner. So
I mean, it almost has to be. You couldn't and should not feel comfortable buying a business you don't understand.
agreed. Okay, next question is Cervantes. You asked about key due diligence items for e-commerce businesses.
Yeah, I'll be very short. Sorry to ask the second question. I look into a company, Chelsea mentioned last time called Centurica.
Yes.
And then they have their like by default pricing for the e-commerce like the due diligence report.
Right.
Something like 6,000 and the more comprehensive like 12,000 or 15,000.
Right.
Actually, I don't know what they do. They just say
Me neither.
click. And then I don't know what they do. You need to pay 6,000 or trying to. So that's why I don't know. Even when I want to read those reports, what's the key item I should really be aware first before I really talk to the third party to do the work. Yeah, thank you.
So, very interesting question. So, what's funny is this is a Centurica report. One of my mentors tried to buy a business in 2016 And he's like a product marketing guy, worked at Procter and Gamble. And once I told him about like the HBS article, like the market for smaller firms, I think he thought he was Warren Buffett. So he went in alone, and instead of working with me, he chose Centurica. And if I told you how many times I laughed at that report, you wouldn't believe me. Because they have a table of contents that goes through things that are relevant. But the way that they do things isn't standardized and structured in a way that really helps you as a buyer understand what they did and the significance of it. And then because they're not good at financial diligence, that's not really what they market, right? They have it. It's almost like, hey, I'm a hockey player, but I can shoot hoops too. Like, sure. All of the things that are e-commerce drivers result in revenue. Revenue minus cost is profit. Profit when it goes through a bank is cash. And so all those things are just indicators of the stuff that I look at primarily, which is, income statement, balance sheet, cash flow. So what's the important e-commerce things? It's almost like you start with cash flow and you start abstracting. So before that, you got to have operating expenses. Before that, you got to have revenue. Well, what drives operating expenses? Well, what's all the money they're spending on all of those eyeballs, ads, conversions, blown carts, retargeting campaigns, the list goes on. What drives revenue? Ads, marketing, non-paid marketing, backlinks, SEO, relevancy, all these things. But when you disaggregate the e-commerce diligence, right, from what cash flows it creates this environment where, let's say you get an accountant in Centurica, right? And like Centurica's doing the e-commerce piece and the accountant's doing the cash. Well, why is profit off 20%? I promise you they're going to point at each other. So I would be cautious around the prices seem good, the packages seem good. And I'm not saying Centurica hasn't helped a lot of people get good deals done. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, in my professional opinion, diligence is chasing the cash. So everything I want to know is, how does this business create and spend cash? And when they create it, how much is left for me to take home and get my return? And so I'm careful of services that don't land me there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so does that mean if I engage Centurica, they only can provide e-commerce due diligence, they won't be able to provide other balance sheet?
I didn't say they can't, but you have to look at who founded Centurica and what is their background. So the number one thing in diligence let me tell you a couple rules of diligence, because I don't want to talk negatively about any other company, right? I'm speaking as general as I can and professional as I can. You should always check primary documents, right? So that's in like your company diligence. If it's financials out of QuickBooks, it should have the QuickBooks header at the top. If it's taxes, it should have the IRS header at the top. If it's in some pretty PDF or marketing document, PowerPoint, get the original document. The second rule of diligence, in my opinion, is trust people and what they've done before. That's what Lucas said at the beginning of the call. And I did not pay him to say it. So if you're paying someone and trusting their advice on watching your cash investment, they should understand cash flow and accounting and finance very well, because that's what they're protecting for you. If their background is in technology and marketing and digital marketing, those are great things if all you're buying is digital marketing. But plenty of digital marketing companies that are great at what they do that have terrible margins and no sustainability that you wouldn't want to buy. So I don't want to say anything negative about anyone else. What I would say is, think about the background of who you're talking to, in so much as they should know what they've done. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's very good.
Have them walk you through a cash flow statement.
Okay. They schedule me a call, but I haven't come to the time.
Yeah, have them walk you from revenue to cash flow on a fly without Investopedia.com. Yeah.
I'll go to the idiot.
No problem.
Chelsea, can I ask a follow-up question on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
I'm just wondering, do you feel like, your services and Centurica are maybe complementary? with that regards, because I understand what you're saying, right? Like financial due diligence, and that's what due diligence is all about, absolutely. But when you're buying a SaaS company or an e-commerce company, right, it's very important, the framework that you're buying, right? Like, basically all of, what you explained earlier, like the technology per se. And I agree with you, right? If you look at the Centurica and who owns it, right, it feels like that's their background. So with that respect, do you feel like those are kind of complementary?
I do. In fact, that's why I said some of the time we do our own digital marketing diligence. Sometimes we leverage our preferred vendors. So if it's outside of our depth, we'll use vendors. We don't use Centurica. Probably we're just too competitive in the market sometimes, Vio, honestly. But we could. I actually know a couple of the owners, the founders of Centurica, who are no longer part of the company. So I do business with them. The other thing is, it's sort of like who's your primary and who's your secondary, I think is a better question. So I think your comment is very well taken. It's accurate. I even kind of said it earlier. We don't do all of that ourselves. We do some of it through partners. I think my question to all of you guys would be, so if you get great e-commerce diligence, does that tell you the business created the cash flow it says that you paid a multiple of? If the business created the cash flow that it said it did, that justifies the multiple that you're paying on that cash flow, then I think it's almost like a lawyer in that way. I think then's the time to sort of cut on the e-commerce specific diligence, because like if the e-commerce stuff is great, but they didn't create the cash flow, that's a little backwards in my mind.
No, that's very helpful. Again, I just feel like, if I would like to buy, and I'm actually evaluating e-commerce business as we speak, right?
Sure.
And I would like to see the full picture, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would like somebody who's specialist in technology, right? Understand technology, and I would like somebody who's specialist in financing, right? And supply chains and all that stuff to get that picture.
I totally agree with you. The other thing, I think you're thinking about it the same way I would, Vio. Sometimes the issue with deals under $5 million is people like to skimp on the most important stuff. And so I'm often in this, like I got an email from a guy yesterday. You guys will appreciate this. So I get an email from a guy, hey, Elliot, I want to do some diligence. But I'm not really a searcher. I have like one rich uncle investor. And so, we're really picky on fees. And so we can't spend money where we don't need to. And we got to be really cost effective on the diligence. And earlier in my career, that used to like frustrate me. But I just replied back with, hey, I really appreciate that. And having been a business buyer, I understand your sentiment. But what if I told you I'm a growing business and I really want to minimize the amount of work I do per quality of earnings? How would that make you feel? And he's like, you know what, you're right, Elliot, send me a proposal. Because the reality is, if you underpay your security guard going into a dangerous setting and you get into some trouble, what happens? You get beat up. If you underpay for your bulletproof vest and you go into a war zone and get shot, you're going to be injured. And so when I'm thinking about $1 million investments and people being short on diligence, it kind of makes me chuckle sometimes because of the importance that we provide in the process. And then around your point, Vio, I would want a full picture too from people who are experts in the parts that were most important. So I couldn't agree with you more. I wish more people thought about it that way, honestly. And if you need any help on yours, whether it's official or unofficial, please reach out.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I have to echo the sentiment. Like we hear it all the time about kind of trying to cut corners on due diligence. And I get it if you've done 5 deals and you kind of know how to tell on your own.
Right.
That makes sense, I guess, kind of. But I don't know. That's one thing I never understand. Like when I'm having conversations with people, why they're like, well, I don't want to pay for a full quality of earnings. Okay. If you're going to pay for anything, I feel like that would probably be a smart thing to pay for, or just the diligence kind of in general.
Right. And it's even crazier to me as a reformed engineer. Like, so think systems, process, do the full thing, not part, because you can sub-optimize part and screw up the whole. Then as like a finance guy, understanding that. So here's what people will say. Hey man, just look at the income statement. you don't really need to spend as much time on the balance sheet and the cash flow. They're all connected, dude. So I actually can't audit the income statement by itself because you could tell lies on the balance sheet and the cash flow statement and hide them in the income statement. Man, just income statement, balance sheet, not cash. Are you sure that's what you want? It's not comprehensive. It's like, hey, man, check out my car before I buy it from my neighbor. But like, just look at the wheels and the tires and like the tailpipe. Like, not that engine and transmission thing. They're too complicated. I don't want to pay for it. What did you just buy? I just don't get it. And I know that you might not speak the language of like 3-statement financials, but like, let me just give you guys a little bit of game. And some of you guys might already have this. The income statement is what an engineer would call a flow document. So it's from period 1 to period 2. So from January 2020 to December 2020, here's all the revenue that flew through this machine. Here's all the cost of goods sold that like flowed through this machine. Here's all the operating expenses that flowed through this machine. And so therefore, here's all the profit that flowed through this machine, right? The balance statement is a point in time. So it's a point document. So the balance sheet is December 31st, 2020, January 1st, 2020. When you put the two together, you get another flow document that's the cash flow statement. You can't spend anything on the income statement. Not a thing. The balance sheet is actually a representation of every cash balance that the business has anywhere, in the bank, in its warehouse, intangibles, money that was put in by the owners years ago. So that's an accounting of all those things. You can't spend stuff directly out of anywhere on there except cash. And then the cash flow statement shows you where all the cash went. You can create the cash flow statement out of the income statement and the balance sheet. But without all three, you can't audit the full financial picture of a business. So when people are like, hey, just EBITDA and income statement, I'm just looking, I almost have to blink a couple of times. Did you say that? So don't skimp in those areas, because really, it's like what happens is people will say, hey, I'm short on money, or I don't want to spend it. So can you do a little bit less? But it's not like linear. Like a full quality of earnings gives you like a full picture of the business. When you take 20% away, you don't get like 80% of the analysis. You get like 40%. So you got 40% of the value for like 80% of the cost. So just be mindful of that.
All right. If it's okay, are there any other questions, or can we dive into some of the war stories, or sound very familiar to some of the conversations happening on Slack? So I was going to probe into them. If you guys don't have one you want to probe into yourself, Rodrigo gave you a thumbs up, and he's the only one that matters. So you guys just go along with it because he's the only talking to me. Okay, so I want to dive into number 11 on your war stories, because we're hearing it so much both in our free community and in the lab around brokers pushing asset purchase agreements. Like, it's driving me insane.
Chelsea, I've been there. I almost went insane in 2014. So the number one rule of negotiation is you can get anything in this world if you can negotiate it. So if a broker asks for a purchase agreement before the letter of intent and they can get it, then you have to recognize that's what happened. And by not doing it, you pushed yourself out of the process, right? Doesn't make any sense on God's green earth to submit a purchase agreement before a letter of intent. Not one single bit. It's like, hey, here's the marriage protocols before the engagement. What? However, if you take a step back, right, and think about like what's binding and what's not, you could put 2 pages on a letter of intent and call it a purchase agreement and suffice the requirement and keep going, right? The reality is a purchase agreement without your cash that you're bringing to the table is useless. So before you get into the academic discussion of, I don't want to do a purchase agreement for a letter of intent, just think about slapping 2 pages on the letter of intent and calling it a purchase agreement. If you've seen the sample purchase agreements from these brokers, some of them are as like small as 2 pages, right? and you think you're like promising stuff. Everything is subject to due diligence, subject to what the bank will finance, subject to what you're willing to pay. And so it's like this false positive, which isn't my favorite way to go into negotiations because I think it sets up for a reframing later down the line. But if that's what you kind of need to stay in the process and you like the deal, I consider it. The other thing I would say around that is one of the most frustrating things that happened when I was doing deals, dealing with the broker, was there was a broker that not only wouldn't let their client sign a letter of intent until they had a purchase agreement, but they wouldn't let us talk to their client until we had a purchase agreement. And my business partner at the time was, in his mid 50s, and he'd been doing it for 20 years. So he was talking to the old school guy trying to figure out what was up. And he's like, Elliot, look, I don't like it for us, but I love it for him. And if he's able to get it, who are we to argue? I told him we want the deals where you can't get that. And that's probably all we're interested in. And then what I found out soon thereafter, and you guys should all do this, you should find out how the brokers you deal with, like maybe your favorite one or two, respectfully ask them how they get paid. How much comes up front? How much comes at close? Approximately what percentages, so you know, right? And then if a guy says they want a purchase agreement before a letter of intent, ask them, hey, do you get paid extra money if I do a purchase agreement right now? Do you get a fee for this? Now, once again, the guy's like, by gosh, Elliot, you got me on that one. I sure do. So can you do me a solid and send it in? But if the guy doesn't say anything for like 5 or 6 seconds, he just told you. And so then it's sort of like, do you want to argue with the dude about his check or a gal about their check? So Chelsea, it frustrates me to no end too. If I like the deal, I go with the flow.
Necessary evil, right? So that's what was so funny. So I'm sitting here talking to this person about it, and as I'm talking, I'm kind of like, I hate it because it just feels like it's self-serving on the broker side, and they're trying to kind of bully you. And
They are.
I don't like that.
They are.
But as I'm talking, I'm like, well, both the LOI and the APA can be backed out of the exact same way. So it's kind of irrelevant which one you're signing. I just personally don't like being forced into doing something that I'm not comfortable with. But at the end of the day, if I really like the deal, as long as I was positive that the APA was written so that I could back out of it for all the same reasons, then it actually gives me more exclusivity, kind of.
It does.
The LOI does. So
it does. The other thing, how many of you guys have like a sales background? Anybody? So one of the first rules of sales is you don't take no from a person who can't say yes. Who's the only person in this transaction that can say yes besides you? The seller. The broker can't close the deal. So when you're frustrated with the broker, you think the broker is 100% aligned with the seller. No. The broker has their own set of incentives. They're not legally a fiduciary. So you have to recognize that sometimes you have to do and say things to get the broker to move out of the way so you can have a real discussion with the seller. And that cuts both ways. So it cuts to your benefit when the broker is crazy and wants a purchase agreement before a letter of intent. It also cuts against you. So how many of you guys have sent in a letter of intent to a broker, had the broker say he showed it to a seller and have edits? You respond to the edit, send it back to the broker. The broker says, okay, let's have a discussion with the seller to talk over it. And on the call, you get the inclination that the seller never saw the letter of intent before that moment. And that happen to anybody? So 20% of the deals I worked on before I stopped doing it, I would take the broker's word for it that the seller had seen the letter of intent. And when they marked it up, I would address those things. Many of them shorten the exclusivity period, get rid of seller carry. That seller didn't say anything about what they're willing to hold back. That broker gets paid a percentage of cash at close. So they don't want holdback, probably more than the seller doesn't, because the seller understands it's a bet. So I would encourage you guys, if you get marks back from a broker and you get the sense that it's the broker and not the seller, ask him, so are these the final edits on my letter of intent? Because that puts the broker in a bind. Because if he says yes on that, and then you respond to those, and then the seller has more, he's exposed him or herself as a not truth teller. I don't like the word liar. And now they've blown themselves up in a process, and I've seen that happen. So another little tip, don't negotiate 3 times on the LOI the seller's only seen once.
That's helpful. Any other questions? Or any other war stories you guys want to dive into? This is the quietest you guys have been. Come off mute, guys.
I just want to say that, like, so I worked with Elliot on deal sourcing, and like what he just said, like the type of advice that he just gave everybody was like the type of thing that I would call him, because I had this deal sourcing relationship with him and it was the deal sourcing is like it was not remarkably expensive at all, and I would get deals, and then I'd also have them available if like I wanted to make an offer on a deal. And I think that it made sense for Elliot to help me because, right, I get under LOI and then I work with him on diligence. Yeah. So it works for me too. But he, like that type of detail that he has around getting these deals done and getting LOI signed and negotiating and knowing kind of the dynamics that go on in this really like detailed way from his own experience helped me like specifically on my deal because he was able to like tailor his experience to exactly what I was going through. And was one of the ways that I really got value from working with him. And I just wanted to like point that out because it's like a good little tidbit, I think.
Thank you very much, Lucas. I think, I sell the quality of earnings, but I think the most value comes from these deal advisory moments where you save, a month of time realizing the broker's negotiating you without the seller. It's these, bespoke times when I give you a no in a week and somebody else would have given you a no in a month with the big old bill. It's these moments where you get caught up. There were a couple of times where you had questions of me, Lucas, about like, was this thing that didn't make sense in the financials worth arguing over or having heartburn over? And it was like having someone to call and the answer is no, like worry about something else. And then you go to sleep that night, like you're not worried about it. And so I do think there's a huge piece of this. And most of my clients will say the same thing Lucas did. It's the quality of earnings and financial diligence is a means to get good deals done and to kick bad deals out. So when people start talking about trailing 12-month EBITDA, revenue recognition, that's it. That's just a piece of it. This is a tool to understand if the business worth what you're paying for it. And holistically, all the other ins and outs you're going to need to know between when you start your process deal sourcing to when you close it so that you don't get hosed. And then, Lucas, we talked about this other dynamic, and this isn't for everyone on the line because we have some demographic differences, right? But brokers will try to old school you too. So will sellers. They're like, this young dude doesn't know squat. I'm going to push him and see what happens. And I'm going to tell him it's 30 years of experience on why I'm pushing. I'm really just pushing him because I want money. And so things like that is great to have somebody with my experience to kind of, let's hop on the phone and see if he'll say it to me. So there's a lot of benefits in working with us that I think people are seeing the benefit of. Chelsea, I'm kind of with you. I don't think these guys and gals are this quiet normally.
Not normally. I think it's because Walker's not here, which is just making me feel bad.
Did Walker stand me up? He didn't. Last time we hung out so much, we had so much fun.
So Walker is on vacation. He's in the Rocky Mountains with his kids and his wife, and so I begged him to not dial in or email.
Chelsea, you gave him vacation?
I tried. He was still emailing me this morning, though. I'm like, stop it, damn it.
Yeah.
And so, yes, please come off mute, because I missed your
Bradley, Austin,
Hey, Elliot,
Cindy.
I got a question for you.
All right, what you got?
Hey, so kind of continuing on the situation where you have a broker that's kind of blocking getting in the way, especially with now the purchase agreement.
Sure.
So I think they have a obligation to show the documents that you send over to the seller. I mean, do you ever? Because I think I'm going to run into this with the purchase agreement because I ran into exactly that situation with the LOI.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out how do I push things, right? How do I get past the broker? Because I think I'm going to run into exactly that. And I think calling him on, hey, are these the final edits? He's going to say, I don't know. He's going to kind of play stupid so that he can keep coming back with edits. So I guess what what tips do you have in that situation?
Okay, I'm going to ask Chelsea for permission. Chelsea, my favorite analogy to go into in this moment is a dating one, a G-rated dating one. Can I? Okay. All right.
Have you talked with Walker? It's not, G-rated.
I asked.
You guys have all been on there where I'm like, okay.
I ask permission every single time so I don't get in trouble. So the most poignant mention that you can push the broker, but the broker is one of those gatekeepers, almost like the CEO's executive assistant, that once you piss them off, your life became 10 times harder. So professionally push, yes, but you want to make friends with these people too, way more than you want to push. I have a client right now that loves yelling at the broker in email. And like, I don't have the same relationship with him that I have with Lucas, because I would have told Lucas to shut the what up, But like this guy, I want to be like, shut the what up. Like, you're going to pay for each and every one of these nasty emails, dude. But he doesn't see it. So never piss off the seller unless you have to. And like second to that is only piss off the broker if you get way more juice than squeeze. The way to
What I'm trying to do is keep that relationship.
Here's how you do it.
For exactly that reason. Yeah.
Stop until you get on the phone with the seller. The only way to know if they're the final edits is to ask the guy who can say yes. So, hey, I'm available tomorrow between 9 and noon to hear from the seller so I can get final edits. My lawyer told me, wink, wink, to never negotiate with myself. That's a huge thing in the deal world. So use it to your advantage. And so our arrangement is I won't send him edits until they come from the seller. So we need to sort of set up a seller call. The other dating analogy. So Sarah wants to take you out, Jason. And Jason, you say, I'm only going to a steakhouse that's 5-star, baby. If you can't take me to a steakhouse that's 5-star, then I don't want to go. Well, she says, I like Longhorn. You want to go get a steak? If you like, right? And if you like her, you'll go. So people can play hardball with you verbally all they want. The reality is you're the money bag bringing a bunch of cash to the table. And if you don't return a call, so if you're like once a day email or once a day call, and you say, hey, the next step needs to be I talk to the seller, and then go ghost for 3 days, say you're in the Rockies, like Walker. I promise you that broker who gets paid 10% or so of what you bring to the table is going to change his dialect with you somehow, some way. Does that make sense? So like my recommendation is these deal environments can get very anxiety driving, right? Lots of money, lots of risk. It may be your 4th or 5th time, all of that. There's a lot of finesse. It's almost like a layup sometimes as opposed to like a dunk. So sometimes the play is, hey, I just don't know how I negotiate a letter for $1 million that I'm not sure the guy who has to accept it has seen. How can I even believe a document for $1 million? The guy, I sent him a document for $1 million and he won't talk to me. And then you're not even telling anyone anything. You're kind of saying, you must be stupid if I think a guy who I sent a letter for $1 million won't get on the phone with me. So, and all those things around brokers and getting them out of the way, you get more, with honey than with, what. So if you can be nice and regimented and thoughtful and patient, and also use like your inside and your outside game. So sometimes the solution is press. Call 3 times a day. If you send a letter of intent, 3 days have gone by, you haven't heard back, call the guy 3 times a day. Like your water was cut off. But sometimes the solution is the guy says, there's always 2 other offers, right? Oh, thanks for sending in your LOI. Man, you wouldn't believe it. This morning, dude, 2 other offers came in. One from a strategic and one from a private equity group. If I had $1,000 for every time I heard that. And oh, by the way, I know it's Thursday, but like the strategics offer blows up tomorrow. So you really got to get your offer in tonight if you want to see the deal. And it's, I don't know if you guys, I posted on Search Finder, I have like 5 big negotiating mistakes I think people make. And this is in that. And I can send that to you guys as well. But the way to sort of deal with that is to wait till the day after that other offer blew up and then just call the broker. Because if he's still talking to you, clearly that other offer didn't explode. So.
We have one question that I didn't ask up above about Rodrigo asked in the chat a while ago. Can you provide due diligence services outside the U.S., for example, the UK?
Yep, I've done deals in the UK. The guy I talked about earlier that I was doing e-commerce diligence for, he's in Sweden. I did 2 deals in Germany earlier this year. I've done deals in Mexico, Canada, South America. I work for some Amsterdam private equity guys. So I have Europe pretty well covered, North America, and some South America. So I can do deals there. I've talked to guys in Africa and Australia before. We didn't get signed up, but it's amazing because the fundamental process is numbers based, and there's only really 2 financial structures. It's either GAAP in the United States or IFRS, like everywhere else. So, and they're not all that different, honestly. So, yes, I can, Rodrigo. I'd love to talk to you about what you're working on.
Austin, you're up.
Hey, Elliot.
Hey.
I was wondering if you have any advice around situations where the owner's attorney tears apart your LOI to sort of justify their value, and you have to navigate that.
I'm so glad that you asked that question. So the fundamental thing you guys need to know is that here in this question is not only do lawyers and accountants, the seller's lawyer and accountant, sometimes want to do things to justify their fee, or they want to be the most intelligent person in the room. What happens to the seller's attorney after he sells?
After you what? I'm sorry?
After the seller sells, what happens to the seller's attorney?
He gets paid.
But the day after that. So what's his incentive? To blow up your deal. Right? The check at closing for the lawyer who's just receiving your lawyer's purchase agreement and reading through it is less than probably what he gets from that seller in 1 year on ongoing contract negotiation and other legal stuff. So one of my fundamental rules of doing deals is always let somebody else be the smartest person in the room. Right? So you take in all the edits, you do what you can with them. The other thing that I'd encourage you to think about is there's often times when like the lawyer can, like it's easy, like you guys know, like, okay, so, oh, that Chelsea, she did this and she did that and she did the other, and I'm going to talk about her on LinkedIn and Facebook, and I don't like this and I don't like that, and period, exclamation point, all caps. That's like the lawyer marking up your LOI. So sometimes I play dumb, like I didn't understand the markups, and actually get the lawyer on the phone with the seller to have him read them out to me one by one. The seller will get tired of that before you will. Guarantee. The seller is not sitting on the phone for 2 hours to go through all those markups. That's another way.
That's hysterical. I love that.
It's not, they won't do it. So the other piece is that at a certain point, Austin, and again, like I didn't want to talk negatively about another company directly because I think it's just unprofessional. And I think the same thing holds true for you reminding a seller directly that the lawyer ends his relationship when the deal closes. So his incentive is to blow up your deal. But you can ask them the question like I did. Hey, what happens to your lawyer after this? Now, these are entrepreneurs, betting guys, right? They're taking risk and making money on it. If you ask an entrepreneur something like that, they're going to say, yeah, you're right. The dude's unreasonable. He's been unreasonable for 20 years, Austin. Can you deal with the edits and kind of come back with something that's reasonable? I'll get them off your back. And that's, again, where that old schooling stuff comes into play, too. So, long answer. But, again, to what I was telling Jason, if you can be patient, like you can be furious in your head or think this is stupid. But like plot out your steps to maximize your ability to move as you get to the answer you want. And if you don't like the response somebody gets via email, or like if something comes back crazy, like if somebody sends you like a 3-paragraph email, act like you didn't understand it and get on a phone call and have them explain it to you. People have a lot harder time saying things than that, Chelsea. I just tell you what.
Well, thank you very much.
Very welcome.
Brian, you're up. That's good advice, Elliot. I like it.
Hey, Elliot, can you go through your Deal Sourcing Plus service and just kind of, from your own words? I looked through the PDF that you showed. Doing your own deal flow versus having you help out. What are some of the advantages for having you help out with some deal flow?
Sure. So deal flow's tough. It's almost the price to pay to get in this game. Bringing the money to the table, closing the deal, being a millionaire, all that stuff is fun. But to play that game, you have to source deals. And so what ends up happening is that a lot of searchers, ETA folks, sub-optimize because they're looking at 3 deals a month. And if you're looking at 3 deals a month, you're going to close the best out of 3, which is probably the 3rd worst out of 10 and wouldn't even make it on like the marquee if you looked at 50, right? So what ends up happening is a lot of people get started, underestimate how difficult it is to get deal flow. And then like back to the dating analogy, you're it's Sarah chasing Jason all around the country because she just loves Jason, right? But the reality is like if she went on 10 dates, she'd probably find somebody better, but like you got to get them. So our deal flow plus program is sort of 2/3 deal sourcing specifically, 1/3 deal advisory, right? So the 2/3 is we have a database of 1,800 business brokers, 2,200 mid-level investment bankers, over 160 sites that list deals, over 50 proprietary deal sources, so like private bankers, asset managers for high net worth individuals, family office folks, lawyers, accountants, estate planning attorneys, all of that have clients who own businesses and sometimes sell. And we take in your criteria for deals, however specific or open it is, and we send that information out to all those sources. And over the course of about 2 to 3 months, we get significant deal flow in from a database I've built over 10 years that would be hard for anybody else to replicate. And even if they had the names or emails, because people scrape stuff all the time, 20% of those people know me by name. So when I'm looking for stuff, the first challenge my business partner gave me, the older one, he said, call 5 brokers and ask them what deals they have. I bet you $1,000 I can get deals they didn't tell you about. I lost that bet. So we go out to the sources, we get you signed up with deal flow. You have all the deals, the information to reach out to them. And then the third, that's really, I think, the bigger value add, although both are big, is now you like a deal, it's $1 million in SDE, it's an hour from your house, and now you need to negotiate through a indication of interest, a letter of intent, a purchase price, a structure. And so we help you go through those deals and talk through all those bespoke points so that you're sort of putting your best foot forward. And whether that means running towards a deal that makes sense or kind of saying, you called the broker 28 times, do you think this is the deal for you? So our service, it lasts about 3 months. The first 2 or 3 weeks are us kind of getting you set up on the deal flow engine. After that, we typically meet every other week to go through the deals that have been found. And success typically looks like Lucas, right? So you get started in the process, a couple weeks in, you find a deal that you like, and then we're working through diligence, right? I would say bare minimum, you'll be looking at way more deals than you'd be looking at by yourself. And so I think what's funny is sometimes the deals the people get or sign up may not be deals that we source for them. Well, Elliot, that means the biggest correlation between good deals closed is number of deals looked at. So the reason you know a deal is so great is because you're looking at a bigger volume. I bet most of you guys that have been doing this for like 3 to 6 months, if the best deal you've seen up until today had come in the first week you started, you wouldn't have known it. That's it. So that's kind of how the service works. And if you have more questions, please ping me via email. I can share more. I kind of talked about it at a high level.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Doug, you're up.
You bet. Elliot, you just mentioned IOI a minute ago, and maybe 10 minutes back, we talked about negotiating against yourself. So I've been seeing some opportunities through a few lower middle market groups that are requiring these IOIs.
Sure.
Which is kind of frustrating. Can you speak on the strategy of how to work through an IOI when there's no selling price shown?
Yeah. Are you speaking to investment bankers, brokers, a little bit of both?
So these particular groups would be ACT Capital Advisors and Generational Equity.
Okay.
And they tend to, I think they're doing middle market deals, but then they occasionally have some that are done by sub 2 million EBITDA kind of range, and they apply the same process.
Sure. So this is where deal making becomes more of an art than a science. I would personally consider generational equity a business brokerage. I'm not as familiar with ACT. When I first started in the deal business, I used to follow a lot of rules. Doug, 10 years in, I would admit I'm less of a rule follower. I'm not like a wild child. I pick the ones that work for me and I test the ones that don't. So to me, it was always weird that a letter of intent was a souped up indication, like I needed 2 different data sets to value the company before I saw diligence information. You know, like even when I was in private equity, I'm like, so we get one data set, we give a indication. Then the banker always says you need to pay more. So then we go up and write the same thing on the letter of intent without a range and with 2 sentences on structure. So I try to minimize the work I do on indications, if I even send them, to be completely honest. So my indications are typically sent via email. And, well, can you type this up? Well, think about that. If I'm a person who gets paid a percentage of what you're offering, do I really care if it's on your letterhead or not? I know what the valuation is, right? So I kind of push the limit there to not waste time. See you later, Lucas. Thanks for the intro. The other thing is sometimes I forget and I send a letter of intent instead and just kind of see how it plays.
I feel like the IOI. I mean, we did all kinds of different things, right? In really big deals, and so the IOI, or I think ours was I don't know, it was a different name, but anyway,
Yeah.
it's just a silly formality. And so
Yeah.
if it can't be just a quick line in an email, but like what exactly are they trying to achieve, right?
I'm glad you agree with me, Chelsea. After being in this game as long as I have, if I could say it, without being worried about people like shouting at me on the internet, I don't see a lot of value in it. I mean, essentially, if all they're going to tell you is to take your price up, why don't I just send you a letter of intent? And here's the thing. If your letter of intent is good enough, the broker or the banker will show it to the seller before their process is over. Like, what seller doesn't want to see a letter of intent? It's not like they're sitting there like, no, don't show it to me. Not until July 4th, dude. I don't want to see him. So when you kind of think about the process from the other side, oops, I sent a letter of intent.
Did you say generational?
That's what Doug said, yeah.
Okay. So one of our other members is dealing with generational. I think they're just using a traditional process, kind of for bigger deals. And so requiring an IOI, who is it? gyms that is dealing with generational, and they have a very it models just so everybody knows, it models the structure of like the $500 million deals my company was doing, like that is super like just strict, and there's time frames and proposals and calls, and it's just completely absurd for a $1.2 million company. But I think that it might be maybe some people just bringing with them the known structure that they're used to. But if you have somebody kind of pushing back on the style of IOI that you're providing,
I have, it's just this intermediary step before they'll even release the financial information that I feel like I need to do a fair evaluation. And it's also a technique to not disclose any of the seller's kind of desires. So you end up in this self-negotiation. Well, maybe I need to go up another half million because I'm in this range where maybe institutional guys are coming down into my space. And so
that's the same conversation I have with Jim, and it's absurd. Like, you guys don't want to negotiate against yourselves.
No.
And what the advice I gave to him, right, wrong, or indifferent, right, was like, you know what you're willing to pay. Don't let anyone make you feel like they're putting a fire under you to make you change that, right? Because he felt very pressured by this imaginary PE interest. And I was like, no offense, but no PE firm I've ever met would be interested in this deal. And not to be mean, but it's just not an attractive deal to anyone I know in that space.
Or I know in that space, just because of the size. Yeah.
Right. We talked in the industry was really, really bizarre. But
Okay.
anyway, we talk about the variation of brokers, and that's part of doing business in this space, right? Is you have to learn how to manage the variance across brokers. That's also why, and I can't tell you guys this enough, like, we need you to give everybody feedback. So there's a broker feedback channel on Slack. If you have a weird experience or you have a good experience, tell people about it so that they know who they can come talk to. Like, I would like Jim to know he can come talk to you, Doug, right? So that it doesn't have to be me having not been through this process, with them. And so please make sure that you're sharing your feedback. If you find a really great broker, I've had one person do that where they're like, this guy knew what he was doing, visit if he's got deals, but nobody else really shares. And so make sure you guys are doing that, especially this bizarre stuff.
You should have a database of do not engage brokers if you've been looking at deals for 3 to 6 months as well. There are some folks that are still in my database from 2013 that are do not engage. So when I see like clients come in with deals from those guys, I'm like, let me just show you the email from 2013. This guy's, beyond touched. So, and here's the other thing. Sometimes beyond touch brokers get great deals. So back to my comment, I think to Jason, even if it frustrates you, Doug, sometimes you smiley face do it if you like the deal. But I also encourage people to, like Chelsea said, I couldn't agree more. Your valuation is yours. You're the one bringing the Brinks truck. You're the one putting the personal guarantee out. Hold true to your valuation. Whatever wonky stuff they do will pale in comparison once you're speaking directly to the seller in due diligence, right? That broker's going to go to sleep. So you got to deal with them for like another couple of weeks if you're successful. So keep that in mind too. You'll be dealing with the seller if you're successful for years.
good coaching, thanks.
At the end of the day, like, this was my conversation with Jim, is like, this is why we tell you guys to do a lot of modeling and why you do break-even analysis, is why you have kind of the initial calculators. Is I don't care what someone's willing to pay for the business, you have to see if even would make sense for you, right? And that's why you kind of need to know, and that's what I told him. I'm like, you need to know what your bottom line is before the deal doesn't make financial sense anymore. If they're telling you they're going to get higher than that, then if it were me, and we talk a lot about branding and reputation, right? Because that's all you have to go on when you're searching is your brand and the reputation that they have with you. Just say this is my top. Am I in it or am I not? Right? I don't want to waste anyone's time. This is what I would be willing to spend at the max. And so he did that, and it kind of just went away, right? Because the broker was like, no, there's no way that they were going to take that about. It's like, okay, peace out. I'm not paying you 6X for this business. It's not happening.
And here's another one. Sometimes the broker knows his seller is unreasonable, and he's just trying to fetch a price high enough for that wonky guy or gal to get interested, right? A lot of these brokers don't even take retainer fees anymore. The market is so competitive. So it's a selling option for a guy or a gal. So I'll sell at 6X, and he's trying to figure out, can he get you to 6X? And so sometimes, as uncomfortable as it is early in your process, you have to learn or earn the fortitude to, this is my price. And then what I encourage people to do, go dark for a couple of days. Like after you followed up a lot, purposefully, I set a reminder on my calendar. Like it's Thursday. I'm not talking to this guy till 3 p.m. on Monday. I don't care what comes. I don't care how many calls. You'll be amazed how many times like that, even couple of day change in cadence will clear out some bull mess. Because they get paid a portion of what the highest bidder brings to the table, and you'll know if you're the highest bidder in 3 days.
I actually had a similar situation, but I asked a broker if there's a reason that the business justified the multiple that it had.
Right.
And he actually essentially asked me to please put in, a bid at a much lower price because he was trying to get the seller to be more reasonable. It's like sometimes we have to kind of, I can't remember how he worded it, but basically we have to coach the client that their multiple might not be realistic, and the market kind of has to do that for them. I mean, he told me to put it in a lower multiple because the seller wasn't.
And so I hope everybody heard Jason. So that's deal lesson, like muscle memory for all of you. So sometimes you think the person's wonky, and so you don't want to push them because they might get like wonkier. Sometimes you think they're wonky and you say something very reasonable but stern, and then they come back to like human land. Like, hey man, help me out here. This seller I got is crazy and I work for him. Can you put a low offer in here so I can tell this guy that he's, in the clouds? And on that day, you're going to be like, had I sat in my room for a week mulling over how frustrated I was, I wouldn't have said that statement that was a bit tough for me to muster, but might save you 6 months.
I like it. Dawson, you're up.
Hey, Elliot.
Hey.
So I'm just wondering, when it comes to proprietary deal flow, like you're reaching out, you're working with someone, and they say that they're interested in starting a discussion around business. When do you typically get involved? What is the right time to involve someone like you in that process?
I think the ideal time is when you start thinking about, not when you've done it, but like when you start thinking about a letter of intent or evaluation is probably the ideal time to start talking to me. Whether we get engaged at that point or not, there's so many reasons why it helps. And I mentioned a couple of these earlier on the call, but I think they're worth saying again. I can help most things in diligence and help you like structure out, negotiate out, kind of adjust things. But if you get into a terrible letter of intent, I can't help you there. If you give up too much pre-LOI, I can't help you. And if you structure a deal that's so wonky that like lenders are going to kind of balk at it, it's too late. So I think it's great. And Chelsea and Walker, I'm sure, are giving great advice too. I'm another outlet for that. But I think like right when you're thinking about putting in a letter of intent is probably the best time. And what that allows me to do is to help through each process so that, success is the seller accepts your offer and now we're in diligence. If you knew that we'd be in diligence and you'd be working with me, it makes every single bit of sense in the world to be starting that process earlier. So that's what I would say. And then, I will sort of ruin it. I'm actually leaving you guys with a free offer. So I'm going to do a free valuation and letter of intent review for everyone here in the acquisition lab. It's usually $2,000 what we charge for that. We're going to do it for free for you guys. So I love Walker and Chelsea so much. And plus, I really want people to get good deals done. I think it just benefits the whole ecosystem. So you can go to offerfromelliot.com and you can sign up for the free valuation and letter of intent review. So you can sort of get started with me a bit sooner.
And the link is in the email that I sent to you guys. So it should be in your email for me. One thing that you said, and thank you for that offer, it's extremely generous. One thing that you and Lucas both said that I thought of and then lost of, because I was trying to navigate the chat and
right.
people in, but I don't know if you guys have noticed this common theme that we talk about relationships. But like relationships are your greatest resource to getting deals done. And Elliot has referenced how important it is and how he's there to advise you. We're here to advise you. The other person that I feel like doesn't get engaged soon enough is your lender. So many times I see you guys putting out LOIs, not you guys, but like members putting out LOIs, and they haven't talked to a lender yet. It's like, okay, well, you just said that you'll do something that you don't know if the lender would ever do. And so while that's a great sentiment, that's why, at least I say, like a broken record, how important your lender relationship is, and how you should be picking a lender that you're comfortable with and that seems to have enough business acumen to be your thought partner. Because they.
Hey, Chelsea, can you say that again for the people in the back? That has enough acumen, yes.
Right, and so like, I don't know if you guys have watched Bruce Marks's presentation that he did months ago, but he even, emphasized how important it is just to be able to have early conversations with you. And so you've got your due diligence team, you've got your bankers, you have us, anybody else that's on your team, you should be leveraging them as thought partners, right? Basically everybody, except from what I understand, attorneys, they don't typically offer to help you think for free. That's what I hear anyway. But everybody else basically does. And so, leverage them early in the process so you're not out doing it on your own.
Totally agree with that. And I would echo, you want to be working with people that can be thought partners. Not every banker is Bruce. Some are sort of business development fronts for banks, and some of them don't even necessarily know what their investment committee can really do. And unfortunately, I think some people are just going to have to experience that for the first time in a very unfortunate way. But I think when you start talking to somebody for a little bit of time about deals, you'll get a sense of like who's a talking head and like regurgitating whatever's on the latest like deal rag. And, one way to check people, ask them what their favorite deal was. And if they can't talk to you for like 5-10 minutes about their favorite deal, be very skeptical. Oh yeah, that one manufacturing business, $1 million of EBITDA. It was great. That was my favorite deal. Really?
I like that question actually a lot. So, any other questions? I know we've already gone over time, Elliot. I apologize for that.
As you can tell, I like this, guys. So that's the other thing about working with me is that you probably heard accountants speak and you've heard me speak. I mean, I really enjoy this, and I think the people who work with me enjoy it too. It can be very stressful, like on phones and, models and legal documents that are way too long. So I'm not going to make the time you spend with me boring. We're going to have a good time. That doesn't mean we're any less meticulous or stringent around getting it done right. It just means that my disposition towards work, and part of the reason why I founded my own company, is so that we can have as much fun doing this work as possible.
That's why he's here and why we are in the lab, as you guys have figured out, Walker. I kind of like it. Have fun.
That's it. That's why we get along so well.
That's why you're all here, because you cut the mustard when I was doing your vetting. Any other questions?
I have a question. I don't know how important this is, but for some reason it keeps sticking in my mind. You may ease my concern here, but there was recently there's a company I was looking at. I was interested in it. They did some work they're industrial mining company, so they do a lot of big jobs on mine shafts and oil rigs. Flues for big water projects, dams, that kind of thing. And they had issued warranties. Some of these were 10-year warranties. And, they were $1 million jobs plus. How do you handle something like that in negotiation? I mean, I don't really want to be liable for a $1 million job that somebody did, 5 years ago. So, is this something I should be concerned about? How do you structure it? What do I need to think about?
Oh, Marcelo, absolutely. So this is what, for most companies that are going to report it, is called an off-balance sheet liability. And if you want to know about off-balance sheet liabilities, look up a company called Enron. And I say that like half jokingly, tongue in cheek, but half like serious as a heart attack. So one of those would probably wipe out the whole enterprise value of what you just bought. So when you have catastrophic risk in single instances, you have to mitigate that. So I'm going to try my best not to put anybody to sleep because it's almost 7 o'clock on the East Coast. So the way the balance sheet works is it typically, if it's represented correctly, you do a job for $1 million, you have a 10-year warranty. Hopefully it's, 100% in year 1, 90% in year 2, right? Hopefully it's structured that way as opposed to 100% for all 10 years. But if it's 100% for all 10 years, GAAP would not allow you to recognize all that revenue. IFRS would not allow you to recognize all that revenue in the current period because it's subject to warranty. You either need to buy an insurance policy against that warranty, right? So then you could recognize the revenue in the current period, or you'd have to keep that money on the balance sheet the same way you'd keep an escrow in the bank after a deal closes in case that money gets clawed back. So the way I would handle it broadly is identify it as a catastrophic risk. And then probably before you do much of anything else, you need to figure out, is that a risk you can A, live with, and B, mitigate? And the simplest way I would think of is, can you buy an insurance policy on those long-term liabilities, right? And like Lord of London will insure anything, like people's legs. So, your local insurance company might not, but if you start getting more specialized, you can probably find, I'm sure there's a company that takes on construction warranty insurance. I promise you one's out there. See what the cost of those policies are. Your offer minus the cost of those insurance policies essentially should be the net payment to the seller. And if you want to talk more about that, reach out to me separately. I fear if I speak too much more about insurance and the balance sheet, I'm going to put somebody to sleep.
That's great. No, that's great. That's super helpful. Thank you so much.
Very well.
And also find out if you can. I'm curious to see if they structured it as a 10-year full or step down.
I didn't ask the question, so I just, it was a big shock. It was, I know what to ask now. So I don't know what I don't know, but now I know. So.
Also, Marcelo, I don't know if you heard me, but this is not the land of honor and believability. Get a contract because you need to just look at it. And I can look at it for you. I can play a lawyer on television. Your lawyer probably, for a fee of some sort would look at it. But because it's catastrophic, you need to know, right? There is no deal, no quality of earnings, no lender because if they say, oh, yeah, no, it steps down really quickly. No problem. Don't believe that without reading the contract.
No, and sometimes, Marcello, you can actually find contracts online where they posted them because they're pages to their website.
That's right. Yeah.
So I found very weird things that way, just searching online when I was in my old role. And so I would also just see if you'd like to Google, right, sales contract for blah, 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 or, warranty for blah, blah, blah. Somebody may have uploaded one, so then you'll be able to see it just now before, and then you can confirm due diligence.
Awesome. Yeah, no, that's pretty helpful. Thank you.
All right, anything else?
I can't believe I kept 19 people this long.
I know, right? It's pretty strong, especially since I only had it scheduled until 5:30. So thank you so much for your time, Elliot. It was extremely helpful. Everybody make sure that you go to your email and look at the war stories list as well as the offer code for his generous valuation offer. So otherwise, I will see you all where I see you next, which is likely a butcher call.
Thank you, everyone. I really enjoyed this. I hope I kept everybody awake and gave you something to think about. I look forward to hearing from a lot of you guys as your deals progress.
Thanks a lot. Great session.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, Chelsea. Tell Walker I said thanks, too.
I will. I'm not going to text him, though.
Of course not. Don't get me in trouble.
Not doing it. All right. Thank you.
All right. Take care.